Hey everybody, what's going on? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to put this oil seal on the back end of our 2005 F350. Let's get started. That is right, we've got just about 150,000 miles on our F350 here. I redid the passenger side one a couple of years ago. It was weeping. Basically, in the rear drum on the duals here is one of these oil seals, and over time it breaks down, and all of a sudden, or not all of a sudden, but eventually, all of the rear end lube, gear oil that should be in the rear end, ends up outside of the rear end, flinging all over your wheels, your wheel well. More importantly, your brakes, decreasing your braking power, and making your brakes smoke to make it look like your rear end is on fire. So this is a little culprit, and I'm going to go ahead and get this thing jacked up safely and take these wheels off, and I'll show you what we're working with. Alrighty, we are up on blocks, literally 6x6 blocks under here on both sides. I've actually got both tires off because I've got something else to do too. But you can see, well, maybe not as much for you, but in here is a nice coating of gear oil on everything. Pretty much what needs to happen is the caliper bracket have to come off. These 8 bolts come out. Drive the half shaft of the rear axle comes off. There is a giant nut inside here that comes off. The hub will come out, and in the hub back here, actually I have to split the hub in 2 pieces, and then I'll be able to get to my rear axle seal. Inner, that's what the book calls it. Seems like it's outer because it's outside the vehicle, but anyways, I digress. So that's pretty much what's got to happen. So I'm going to go knock these off, and before you start this project at 10 to 5 on a Sunday afternoon, make sure that you have your RTV or your gasket material to replace this with, to make sure nothing leaks out of the end of here. And also make sure you have some replacement gear oil to put in your differential. Likely you've weeped some out over your travels, and it's now slung everywhere between here and your destinations, including your tire. Let me show you that. There we go. You can see all of our good crusties. This shiny stuff right here is all the oil that is wept out, and the big thick sludge on our wheels. So I hope to get that cleaned off as well. This is just the steely, so not terribly concerned, but it'd be nice to shed that dirty stuff. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and knock these off. I think they're probably 13 or 15 mil heads, and find a drip pan to catch whatever falls out from under here. So let me track that stuff down. Oh, let's not drop them in the goo. All right, those can stay up there. Get a, hey, there's a screwdriver under here. All right, now we've got our bolts out. We go ahead and knock out our half shaft back here. Depending on how much goo you have on here, or how fresh or old it is, you may need a big pry bar. You may just need to whack at it with a mallet. I'm gonna find something a little smaller because this does not really fit back here. I did have this off a couple of years ago, almost 4 years ago now, when I replaced the rotors and the brakes. So yeah, it's got some fresher gasket goo on there, so I'm gonna find something to knock this off with. All right, well that was easier than I thought. I just took my pry bar / chisel and gave it a few taps on the backside with my dead blow hammer, and out it came. Now I've got a paper towel back over here off camera so I can set my half shaft on upright to keep all the important stuff, the inside parts, the splines, out of the dirt and the ground. You can see I am leaking just a little bit of fluid. That's to be expected. So now if we can get this off without getting me completely full of schmutz. All right, there we go. Mighty shaft. Now, just for reference, this has the Dana 80 rear end in it. So if you've got a non-dually, non-1-ton pickup, you may have a slightly different experience, but this is specifically for our 1-ton dually with the Dana 80 on it. So here's where this big other nut and bearing thing comes off. I do have the tool over here in my toolbox. Let me go find that. Alrighty, here it is. It's just a giant thing. And if you want, I'm sure you can rent it from your local auto store for a couple of bucks. I bought one just because oftentimes it's cheaper for me to buy a tool than go rent it and take a couple of trips back, since it's, 20 miles to our nearest parts store, and my scheduling may not always line up with the rental schedule. So basically put it in, spin it loose, see how far you're going in before it gets tight. So when you are reassembling things, you can get a kind of representation of how far you want to tighten it up. Past experiences, I've tightened it up until it's snug, and then I've backed it up a few clicks. You'll hear those clicks here in just a minute. But you don't want this thing to be super tight because there is roller bearings in here. So you want to make sure you're not bound up. That's going to make things have a bad day. So I've got about 3 clicks until it's firm. Like, I don't want to push it past that. So we'll just spin it off. Oops. You can hear those clicks. So as we take off our whole hub assembly here, these bearings in here should come off. We'll take care not to get those full of schmutz either. So now I'm just going to go ahead and take off our caliper bracket on the back side here. Oop. That's kind of dark back here. Neat. The caliper bracket is a 15 mil bolt. You can take off the caliper first, then the bracket, whatever you want to do. For me, I'm just going to go ahead and knock off the bracket and caliper as one assembly, since I've got other work to do with that later. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and do that. You're not going to be able to see this because you're going to look at this and nobody wants to see that. So get the caliper bracket off, and then we'll pull off this hub. Alrighty, we've got our caliper and a caliper bracket off, and let me just show you one of the brake pads. You can see they're just caked with grease and schmutz, and in a perfect world these would be replaced, but again, I don't have them here, and we'll do the next best irresponsible thing and just cake them with brake clean and put them back on here. So that brings us to our big hole hub assembly here. This should pull off. It may be stuck depending on your situation. I think the first time I took these off, it was tough, to say the least. I may have had a whack on it with a dead blow to get it off. But let's just try pull straight out, make sure this bearing in here doesn't fall into your dirty shop floor or the dirt. Thought about working down in the shop just because it's kind of nice now. It's beginning of May for me, and it's 72 degrees today. But I didn't want the 35 mile an hour winds blowing dirt all over my stuff. So we're in the garage. Yep, and it's not. See if we can wiggle it off. There we go. Little by little, I abandoned the brute force effort and took my gear puller a socket big enough to fit over that axle tube, a half of a twist with my good old wrench, and it should pop right out for me. And my bearing went right where I didn't want it to go, in the goo. But that's okay, because we'll get it cleaned up anyways before we reassemble it. There we go. Now, I'm making a puddle on my floor down here. Good thing Super Clean has been one of my sponsors for the last couple of years, because it's going to be time for some of their floor absorbent. All right. All right, let me see if I can get you down here and show you what we're working with. There's another bearing in here. But let me grab the other bearing for reference here. It'll be tough to see. You got the seal here, but in this whole assembly, here is our oil bath bearing seal, and this goes down inside of here like this. Now we have to get the old one out, and knowing from past experiences, that's not the easiest thing to do. So what I've done with other bearings to try to get out of similar places is take a sheet metal screw or something and run it into here, because what it's going to do is go all the way through the seal, push out on the back side, and it's going to push up on the metal of the actual hub assembly. Now, last time I did this on the passenger side, I spent a long time fiddling around with a Dremel and a chisel trying to break this thing, and that took forever. So we're not going to play that game today. We're just going to try and lift this old one out, pound the new one in. I've got a tool around here somewhere for that. There's actually a special tool made for seating these things in. You can also go to your hardware store and buy some PVC caps and spacers. Tap it in there and you're good to go. That's what I did, because that was 15 bucks versus 100 and some dollars for the tool. And it wasn't available at my local shop for rental. So I'm going to find some screws and drill, and we'll see if we can press this old seal out. Well, the metal screws I had were only about 3/4 of an inch long, and this oil bath seal is about 5/8 thick. So those are not going to work. Tried a couple of other screws. I don't have anything handy to do this, so we're going to go the old school way and take off the rotor and get out the Dremel and cut the seal out. So that's going to be rather unpleasant. I'll show you what it looks like when I'm done, because you don't want to watch this. It's going to be painful. Alrighty, well, we got the seal out. That definitely needs about a can of brake clean run through it. And here is what's left of the seal. This was the bottom of it. There we go. And yeah, that's definitely seen better days. So, old seal, new seal. So let's get the thingamajigger cleaned out, bearing cleaned up, and put the new seal in. Alrighty, we have our cleaned up hub here. I blew through most of a can of brake clean, getting everything cleaned out. I did clean out our bearing. I put that in my ultrasonic cleaner for 5 minutes, repacked that with new high temp grease. And last thing we have is our new oil seal. That sets in here. Press in just a hair. And then we have my makeshift installation tool. One side works well for larger items. This is too big for this, so we flip it around. Actually, this should come out. There you go. And this fits on here just perfect. The important thing is to make sure you're hitting it flat and not off to one side. So I'm going to find a little block of wood to sit on here to help ensure it is getting hit in flat. Got our little block of wood, set that on top of here. We're just going to tap it in until it's seated all the way down. Want to make sure it's going in even. If the seal seems like it's seated evenly all the way around that lip, and to me it does look even, our bearing still spins freely. So there we go. Now the next thing we can do here is put our rotor back on, reassemble this assembly, and I'm going to throw a little bit of blue Loctite back on these. I don't expect them to come off, but a little blue Loctite is a little added insurance that it's going to stay on there. And remember, unless you want to hate yourself, don't use the red, because if you do, you're going to be the next person taking it apart again. Now when I took this apart, I had a problem because these bolts were tight and it was laying on the ground, so I couldn't really easily get the bolts off. So what I ended up doing, I'll show you when I tighten these up, is I put the rotor on its side. I took my large pry bar, put it between a couple of the studs, and then took my breaker bar and broke it loose. Not a big deal, but first time I did this on the passenger side, it took me a while to figure that out. And then once you do, it's like, oh, that was so easy. Why didn't I think of that an hour ago? Get this last one that tried to escape. All right. Run these back down. Now let me show you what I meant. We'll set this on the side. Take our breaker bar, stick it in between some of the lugs. And then just give it some force and tighten everybody up. Before I put this back on, I'm just going to take another can of brake clean, hit the inside of here, hit her on the whole parking brake assembly, hit the caliper, and then we'll slap this thing back together. And maybe not cut off my head. Alrighty, we're about ready to start slapping this thing back together. I unloaded about a can and a half of brake clean on the caliper assembly, the parking brake assembly, got the spindle here all cleaned off. And pretty much, I should be able to slide this whole hub assembly, hub and rotor, everything, back on. We've got our nice clean packed bearing in there already. The outer bearing, I'm going to do the same cleaning in the ultrasonic cleaner, repack it, slide it in there. We'll be good to go. This also is not light. Now when you put this on, you want to be careful not to bung up the bearing, the threads or anything. And sorry you can't see me, but I'm sure you can figure out what I'm doing. Give it a good slap on, and there we go. Now if we want, we can go put our caliper bracket back on. I'll do that after I've gotten at least this bearing and end nut on. So let me go clean this guy up. It's not really dirty, but it doesn't hurt to start fresh when I'm putting everything back together for the extra couple of minutes in the cleaner. A little extra bearing grease, a little added peace of mind. Alrighty. run our next bearing through a cycle on the ultrasonic cleaner. Just go ahead and start packing it up a little bit here. I know everyone's got a little different way of packing bearings, and maybe you've got a bearing packer. I don't. I don't do it enough to have one. But I'm okay with that. But big thing is just make sure you get it worked in all the areas here. Again, we'll have some of the lube from the rear end come out here anyways and keep this happy, but why not start off on the right foot with some lube. Just make sure I pick up this albatross before I step in it, because that would go great on the carpeting inside. All right, this is on. We can set this in here now. And get rid of the gloves. Yeah. Without getting me full of grease. All right. Grab the albatross. Where are my other gloves? Alrighty. Now we've got our somewhere. Where did I put it? Oh, over here. So I was looking for this guy here. He's supposed to sound like this because he's got the little teeth in here, the grip. There is a little tab, little ear, and a keyway up on top, so it only goes on one direction. Grab our socket. When you put it on, it's going to be tight originally because you're just seating this whole thing for the first time. I did give it a good whack when I pushed it on originally, so should be pretty good. And that gets me to that tight point. And if you turn this, it's still smooth and free, but it is a little bindy. And you can hear as that grease gets distributed in there, how it quiets down. Yep. Yep, that's where I was before. There we go. We don't have any play side to side. Free and smooth. Now, I want to make sure this surface is cleaned off. I did already get that with some brake clean and a rag when I was cleaning up the rest of that hub. So now we can take our drive shaft, not drive shaft, half axle, whatever you want to call it, and look at any of our old goo and take that off. It's best to start with a clean surface, so. All right, now I'm just gonna slide this in here now to hold it while I go find my RTV or my silicone. There we go. Now, this is splined, of course, and when you're putting it back together, you want to make sure you get your holes lined up for your bolts, of course. But let me go find my gasket maker. We'll put a little bead around this whole assembly here, squish it in. grab more of our blue Loctite for our 8 bolts here, put everything back together. Hopefully this stuff is still good because, well, it's late on a Sunday and nothing's open. And that seems to be kind of hard. This might pose a problem. No, there we go. Haha. I think. There we go. Okay. Pull a little dab of this around everything here. All right, it's not pretty, but it doesn't have to be. So, we'll go and set this back in here, catch our splines. There we go. And we'll get this lined up and get a stud. There we go. There is a little rubber O-ring inside here, so don't force this. If it doesn't fit right up against the hub assembly here, don't squish it, you'll break that O-ring. But the only advice I've got there, let me get these in and started. For those of you asking, the torque on this shows from 66 to 88, depending on model year. So I'm going to set this at just a good old 80. All right. We've gone around the horseshoe twice. Everything is torqued. Last thing to do is put my caliper bracket back on. And those were not 15s, those were again 13/16 to hold those on. So let me get that done. Get my giant mess out of the way. Anyways, the rest of the stuff I'm sure you can figure out goes back together. Tighten down those 2 bolts for the caliper bracket. And then you put your wheel back on, torque it all down, and you're good to go. So, not terribly difficult, not terribly time consuming. Probably twice the time for me because I was filming. Alrighty, well that's gonna wrap this up. I've gotta go dig that bolt out from under the truck. It's actually under the floor jack. So I've gotta go dig that out, get that caliper bracket back on, torque down, same thing with the tires, get those put back on. Really not a tough process to do. It just, especially if you've got to Dremel out that bearing or that oil seal, it's a pain in the butt. But it's not hard. This was the only real special tool that I had to buy. But again, you can likely get it from the parts store to loan if you are working on a tighter schedule than I am. Otherwise, they're not terribly expensive. The seal, again, 30 or 40 bucks. This was for the Dana 80 rear end, dual rear wheel. That is going to be different, I think, single rear wheel or the F350 if you're not running the Dana 80. So double check your specs before you go buy parts. But if you do have a Dana 80 on your 05 F350 dually, it's part 370018A. And hopefully this has been helpful, informational to you. Hit that subscribe button below. We've got lots of general repair, maintenance on our Ford here, along with a handful of other cars in our fleet. Other actual full restorations, other random projects, pretty much anything with wheels, and things that house things with wheels, like our shop project. So until the next video, have fun doing whatever you're doing, wrenching on whatever it may be, and we'll see you in the next video. Take care.